Welcome to Chasing the Narrative, the show that I do because I want to, and we talk about what I want to talk about because it's my show and not yours. This week, we're going to talk to Anthony Vanella. I don't think that's his real name. We're going to find out. So, first of all, is that your real name?
Yes, that is in fact my real name. It is pronounced like an ice cream flavor or very similar one.
Okay, I don't like it. No,
Okay.
actually, I like it a great deal. What I don't like is how long it is. And everybody ends up calling you Vanilla because there's more than one Anthony. I've
Yep.
noticed that people call you Vanilla a lot. And
Yes.
that's not a good nickname for you because you have much more flavor than that. So I feel like, and you don't want to be Tony, right?
No, I do not like Tony.
Okay. Because if you were Tony V, that's a whole different, that's
a different
vibe.
Personality.
Exactly. Yeah. So what we've got going on here is we're going to get to know Anthony. And for those that don't know who he is already, Anthony finished incredibly strong in the ITC, took Best Druhkari, is a member of Team USA for the WTC, and is a general all-around badass. That's what we're talking about today. So I'm not going to talk to Anthony about 40K very much. I want to know about Anthony in general. So we're going to start with some easy stuff. Where were you born?
I was born in Levittown, New York, like suburbia, like the example of suburbia in the textbooks.
Is Levittown the sort of suburbia that is actually just feeding people working in New York City? Or is it the kind of suburbia that's upstate New York and a million cities that are all the same?
No, it is it's on Long Island, so it's right next to New York City. Most of my family worked in like construction or something like that. That usually was in one of the boroughs. We're in like suburbia proper, like what they built it for.
Okay, but you say Long Island, I notice.
Yes,
Long Island. You don't say Long Island.
No, I try and keep them as two separate words. I grew up there, but I moved around a little bit, so I try and avoid sticking to the accent.
Okay, so just rattle off some places you've lived and you're moving around.
I lived upstate for a little while. I live in Jersey now. I lived in Florida for a bit. I spent a bundle of time in Virginia. I went to college in Connecticut for 4 weeks. And that's pretty much it.
So when you say you've lived all over the place, you specifically mean the East Coast?
Yeah, the East Coast. That's all over the place if you grow up near New York City, because New York City is like, just stay here because there's no reason to leave.
Living in Western Washington, I actually have a friend who moved out here from New Jersey, and she saw an airplane at the airport that went to Spokane from Seattle. And she's like, why would anybody fly to a city that's in the same state that you're already in? Doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, well, Spokane's like 5-6 hours away. And she's like, how? I'm like, well,
yeah.
New York is actually the same thing if you go up and down. That's okay.
Yeah, if you go to Buffalo, that is a ride.
Yeah, I've actually been to Buffalo. I'm excited to say.
Yep.
I guess. I went to Niagara Falls. It was cool. All right, so cool. Back to you. What did your parents do, or do they do?
So my parents got divorced when I was pretty young, so I have 4 of them functionally. My mom has worked she's basically like the lady that works in a business that runs the business, but she's in the back and no one tells you about her. She's never really had like an official title, but like when you call, she answers the phone. When the books need to get done, she does that too. Like my mom's in charge of the stuff, but like her title never matches what she actually does.
Just in charge of the stuff. I think I've actually had that job before.
Yeah, so, like all the it's like office manager, kinda. Like, right. I don't know. It's one of those. She's the do stuff person. And she's really good at getting stuff done. My mom will ensure things happen when they need to, likely before they need to.
Oh man, I need some of that in my life, but not from me.
Yeah, it's good to have.
Because that'd be creepy.
My dad is an electrician. He's been an electrician since he was like 17. He's a man of the trade. He's part of my my powerful work ethic comes from that man. He is a absolute saint. My dad is one of the nicest people I've ever I don't praise people that highly consistently. Like that word is like my girlfriend and my dad. Those 2 people are like the nicest human beings that are around. They keep me grounded. They're a huge part of why I'm good at anything.
I don't know if you feel this way, but I just presume that Stephanie must be a saint because she lives with me. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel about it. Like I literally bring like 40 nerds over for a sleepover. Like I'm not a good person to live with.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. I don't know if you're a better person to live with, but I'm wondering if living with you is part of the reason why your girlfriend gets the sainthood.
Pretty regularly we'll have like portions of like just like the people that are in the area to play competitive 40K like up for a weekend. So it's like, yeah, there'll be like people on the couch, there's people on this random bed, people bring a sleeping bag and stay in the extra room. Like,
right.
It gets crazy. So for that and many other reasons, my girlfriend Anna is also a saint. But yeah, so to tackle the other two, my stepdad worked in construction also. He was a contractor. There's a lot of construction. Grew up Italian boy.
Yes, very like there's so many jokes there, but none of them are okay. So I'm just listening.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, there's construction and there's construction, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
We mostly worked in construction. Like,
were they building things or were they fixing things?
They were building things.
Okay, good. I like that.
So yeah, that was pretty. That's everybody. That's all the various jobs and stuff.
Excellent. So, of all of those people, who is the Anthony that's before us today? Who is he most like?
I'd love to say my dad, but it's definitely a blend because my dad is like the one I aspire to be like most, but like I definitely have the like my mom is and this is something you've talked about before. My mom is definitely someone that makes things happen and is not someone that things happen to.
Right.
And I definitely get that from her. My dad is more like deal with the things as they come, and he's a strong man. But he he takes things on the chin and kind of works from there. My mom is like, this is what's going on. And you have to be like, oh, okay, Lisa, all right, whatever you say.
Well, I've actually never been an electrician, obviously, but it seems to me that like that sort of work is very like, now I'm going to do this project and everything that I run into that stops me from doing this project, I just have to resolve or I can't do that project.
Yeah.
Right. And so I understand him being kind of I just have to churn through this sort of guy. That's neat. That's neat.
Yep.
Okay, so little kid Anthony, 4 parents from a very early age.
Yep.
Who did you live with?
I lived with my mom like Monday to Friday, and then I would see my dad on weekends, almost every weekend.
Okay, that's super cool. So you actually were around all of these adults.
Oh yeah, just pretty much from the jump. My mom remarried when I was pretty young, and my dad remarried a little bit later, and has since gotten divorced again. But that's like a whole other thing. But yeah, like I lived with a scattering of adults that entire time.
That's wild. Okay. My parents got divorced because they didn't like each other at some point, and then, but like I was already a teenager, so like it wasn't really the same thing at all. Okay, so as you're growing up, think about tiny baby Anthony. Do you have an earliest memory that's entertaining, or is it just nothing?
One of my, I don't think I have any like super entertaining memories. I have like a oh boy, this kid might not be very smart. Maybe don't put a bunch of money in his college fund memory.
Okay, I want to hear about this.
Yeah, so I was a tiny child, and my dad drove a Bronco, which is big Ford truck.
It's very appropriate for a Italian electrician in Long Island, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was great. You could do side work out of it. So I got out of the back, I got out of the back of it. I was like 5, and I walk over to the back of the car. I'm like, wow, that exhaust pipe is real shiny. I wonder what that feels like. And the car had just been running for quite some time. And I don't know if you know this about exhaust pipes. They get really hot.
Yeah.
So tiny Anthony reached down to touch the exhaust pipe, and then it was too hot to quite extract my hand from. So I just started yelling. My dad was able to remedy this with minimal injury to the child. But that is like one of my earlier memories of me just being like, that's shiny. Ow.
I think every kid has that story, though.
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal is. My kids, none of them have badly burned themselves, I don't think. But like I did. I put my hand on an iron. Like I slammed my brother's hand in a car door. You just got to hurt some people. You just got to hurt some people as you're growing up.
Yeah. I chose to do it in a much more controlled setting later in life, but it definitely initially was mostly myself.
Yeah, for sure. So when did you start? When did you start in martial arts?
I started in martial arts when I was 14. So I had told my mom that I wanted to start martial arts, and I was like, listen, this is a thing I want to do. My mom was like, I don't want you to get hit in the face. And I was like, well, you let me play football, and that's way worse. So maybe just be cool. So then she was cool, and I found a place that I wanted to train, but it was expensive. And my mom was like raising me and my brother and sister at the time. So, it's not a ton of money just laying around. That office person who fixes things job is real important, but it's not super well compensated usually.
Right.
So,
really important, not paid like they are.
Yeah, exactly. So she was like, what you have to do is work for the summer and then you can pay for it. And I was like, all right. So I worked a construction job at like 14 in the summer where I very rapidly learned that was not what I wanted to do. So that was a good life lesson.
What did they have you do? You're not a really big guy. At 14, I can't imagine you were that big.
No, I was basically my current height, but like 130 pounds. So I was not very good at stuff.
Not there for power.
Yeah, and it was pre-martial arts, so I wasn't real coordinated either. Like I was not a very useful asset on a construction site.
Okay. But you did it. You like went to work every day at 14 years old, because I would have given up. Let's be clear.
Oh, yeah, I did the thing. I was given a task and I was like, I must do this to get to the thing I want, so we will just do it. Yeah. So 5 days a week from 6 a.m. until 3 p.m., your boy was sweeping up garbage and taking heavy things from point A to point B, or heavy relative to my frame, which might have been like 2 planks of wood, but it made them take one now. Trip. Yeah.
Right.
So, so I did that for the summer, and that was able to pay for Muay Thai for a year. And that was when I started, when I was 14.
Okay. So you did Muay Thai. What else have you done?
I've done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a little bit. I taught some Kung Fu. I taught and took a little bit of Sanda, which is also known as San Shao, which is like Muay Thai, but instead of elbowing people, you get to throw them. So that one's fun. Okay. And that's pretty much it. I had I've had 7 Muay Thai fights, and I had 1 MMA fight.
Okay. So we're going to talk more about the MMA and the martial arts in part 2 of Anthony. So if you want to hear, I'm going to ask Anthony such tough questions as, why would you pick a hobby where you get punched in the face? That's the sort of stuff we're going to talk about in part 2. But for now, we're going to continue talking about part 1. Okay, so you're now 14. You've worked construction. You're rocking the martial arts classes.
Yep.
Does 40K happen at some point here?
So 40K happens in 2019.
Oh, wow. Okay, we'll get to that. We'll get to that later then.
Yeah, Warhammer Fantasy happens a little bit here. So I pick up Fantasy when I'm in starting to get into high school, because I continued to do random construction jobs, and what does a teenager spend money on but the thing that costs more money than he has? So I start to do it, and I get a bunch of stuff. And I play with this really cool group of dudes who are willing to take in the youngster who's real ambitious.
What army are we talking here, Anthony?
I started on Vampire Counts. Oh, was my very first army.
Death is the only army I still have from the fantasy, so I'm with you.
Yeah. So yeah, I wish I still had all my fantasy armies, but there was an unfortunate incident that led to their demise. So but yeah, I started on Vampire Counts. I really, really liked them. I had a whole bunch of fun playing them. Even as a youngin, I was not super into the paint. I know that's a thing for me now, is that I don't hobby any of the armies that I own. I get messed with about that pretty frequently. But yeah, so I started with Vampire Counts. I was having a grand old time with my super badass Vampire Lord man. That was really fun. And yeah, that was how that started.
Okay, cool. So I believe that at 17, you got your first responsible job of teaching the kickboxing.
Yes, that was when I became adult man Anthony, or started to anyway. That is around when I got.
Who looks at a 17-year-old? I have a 16-year-old basically. Who looks at a 17-year-old and says, this child should teach other people how to kick and punch?
Yep. So the person that chose that was the owner of the largest, what became the largest kickboxing franchise in the world. I Love Kickboxing. I started there when they were on the come up, and the company blew up while I was there. And it was a really interesting experience being with this business, from being ostensibly a pretty small business to having 300 something locations across the US, and some international as well. That business has since died down a whole bunch, but that's a different story for a different time.
Right.
So,
exactly.
So I started teaching there. They basically.
But how does that happen? How do you get asked to teach kickboxing at 17 years old? Are you the star pupil?
My family there's like 8 chains basically of like knew someone who knew someone who knew someone, etc. And that chain ends at the guy that owned the business.
Okay. So he's a family friend.
Yeah, he's basically a family friend.
All right.
So he was like, "Hey, I've seen you fight. Cool. I basically need someone to teach the kids classes because the guy that runs this place doesn't want to do it. And then you can teach the adult classes because I want to pay you a part-time salary that isn't like $30 a week. So just do that." So when I was in high school, my schedule was school from 7:30 to 2:30. Then I would go work from 4 to like 10, and then I would train afterwards with like two pro fighters and one of the amateur fighters that I was friends with at the time that would come and train from like 11 to 1. And I would do that 5 days a week as a 17-year-old and a senior in high school.
So there was nothing else.
Yeah, I went to school, worked, and trained, and I was
no
focused.
Sports, no football anymore at that point, it sounds like.
No, yeah, I stopped playing football basically as soon as I started martial arts when I was like 14. I started doing martial arts when I was 14, and I put everything outside of paintball actually to the wayside. I played paintball for like another year after I started martial arts, and then that was kind of it. It was just martial arts.
Do you find that I know that that's what 40K is like for you now, where you're like all of your free time? Is that is that actually how you've always been? Do you have to have kind of a core interest that I'm going to use the word obsessing over, but you know me well enough, Anthony, to know that I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah, 100%.
But is that just a part of your personality? You need to be obsessing on something?
Yeah, 100%. I find that when I'm not, it's usually because like in the way it interacts with my brain is that like the thing doesn't have enough depth. Like I'll hit like, the point where I'm like ready to, go and be like, all right, let's learn all the things. And then I like bounce off the floor because I've like found out all the things after like a couple of hours of looking into it. I'm like, oh, all right. I mean, that's fine. It's fun to do, but like, I don't really, there's no room to grow. The optimization bits of things are really important to me. But it's weird. The way that interacts with me is it's almost never optimization of theory that is fun for me. It's optimization of execution that I have a good time with. Because like the theory of how to throw a punch is pretty simple. Like make fists connect with face.
Right.
But like how you get there is really important. And that's similar.
Well, there's a lot of what's it called? Kinesiology. There's a lot of like kinesthetics of like how everything's moving, right? Like it's a lot like there's a lot of micro like golf. There's a ton of micro movements that are doing just as much as you aiming at the ball. I would imagine.
100%.
I've never hit anybody. I'm just guessing.
Yeah. No, that's basically right. It's the throwing a punch is like a 24-step process or something crazy when you like actually break it down, and you have to be able to do all those parts right, or you're going to miss or get hit before you hit, and neither of those scenarios is good.
Okay. All right. 24-step process. Great.
Yeah.
So you like to really get into the details. And one of the things that, as you were talking, I thought about was, I've been playfully critical of how many rules Warhammer 40K has, right? I don't actually think that it's bad, but I like being playful about it.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that I am like you. I have to be obsessing over something. Now I cycle much faster than you do. I'll be like, okay, 40K has frustrated me. I'm now going to play this online game with every free moment of my time for 3 weeks. Okay, now I'm back to 40K. Yep. Like that's how my brain handles it. But what I'm realizing as you talk is, do you think for you and I, obviously answer for yourself, that the depth of all of those rules is why we don't get bored of 40K?
Yeah.
Because not only are they changing so often, but there's also a huge myriad of rules, right? And if you really got, and like, there will be times where you want to play Druhkari and no one's playing Druhkari, and now you're looking through all of this nuance and all this detail trying to make a thing on your own. But there's so much, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a huge like component of 40K, at least for me. And I remember distinctly when I was going to get into it, I went up like the story of how I got into 40K, I guess. It was like I went up for a weekend. My girlfriend had like a teaching conference that she had to go to, and I went with her.
Is this Anna or is this some less significant girlfriend?
No, this is Anna. This is the one true, the saint herself.
Oh, the one true girlfriend.
Yeah,
one girlfriend to rule them all. Got it.
Yeah, the one girlfriend to bind them or whatever.
Yes.
So to bind me, I don't know what way to phrase that. Anyway,
wedding rings are a thing. Anyways.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I gotta work on that. We went up to this like teaching conference, and I was like, all right, I've stopped playing WoW competitively. I'm not really fighting.
Thank God.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. Shout out
I've
to my
never
WoW
wanted to go
community.
back. I've
Yeah,
never wanted to go back.
Yeah, my WoW friends are like some of the best friends I've ever made. I owe them for like
me
a
too.
lot. Like one of them literally for me being here. That's like a different story that we can cover. So yeah, so I was like, I need a thing to do, and I went to look at 40K again after years of not looking at anything Games Workshop related.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, like there's so much depth here, and it looks like in this newfangled 8th edition, they've really cleaned up a bunch of it, so it's not as obtuse. Sweet, this can be a competitive game. Awesome, let's try this. And that was how I ended up there, because it's really deep.
So when you obsess about a thing, you're doing it for a lot of years. Like you're like, no, this is the thing I'm doing until everyone's tired of hearing about it. Is basically what happens.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to run into burnout on a thing, because I think part of that is because I'm chasing execution proficiency more so than theory proficiency.
You don't want to make mistakes playing. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So like, because like when I'm, you can get to like the calculator says this is the best result pretty quick, but it's really hard to like get to when I'm doing this, I don't make mistakes executing it every single time step. That takes much longer.
Right.
And I never got there for martial arts, to be perfectly clear. Like that takes a level of mastery that I have not attained in that thing, and I'd been doing that for nearly a decade when I stopped.
Why did you stop?
Basically I just got really busy doing work and life stuff. Up until I was like 24, the jobs that I had were real like scattershot hours and stuff, so it was really easy to like make all the martial arts classes and keep fighting and train and do all the things. But once I got into IT and I was just like a 9-to-5 man at the desk, I found that really fulfilling, A. And B, I just, didn't really have the time, didn't really make sense. Because when I was on the come up in IT, I just took every hour that they would give me. And as it turns out, when you're in an MSP to work at a help desk, that's a lot of them. So I didn't really have time to train.
Yeah. You made it sound when we were talking before that Anna is really important to that pivot into IT, or is she just time period wise similar? Like,
both are true.
Okay, but tell us that story, because I think it's probably great.
Yeah. So Anna, I met at like a really crucial point in my life where I'd been going to therapy for a while, but it was starting to hit home, and I was like really starting to get myself together after what was a fairly traumatic like 5-year window, 17 to 22. Okay. That was not the brightest part in young Anthony's life. Okay. What most people refer to as like their college golden years.
Do we want to talk about some of the shenanigans in there real quick?
Oh yeah, we can go into that.
What sorts of shenanigans are we talking about here?
I was briefly homeless. I got stabbed.
How were you homeless? How does that happen?
So young Anthony had a very rocky relationship with his mom. Part of that is through some failings of her own. Most of it really, but part of it is, I was a 17-year-old kid who wasn't doing intelligent things.
And you probably knew everything, which is helpful.
I didn't know everything. But
17-year-olds think that they did.
Yeah. I was even pretty upfront that like I don't know what's going on. Like I don't know what this is, but I'm not doing a very good job. And like I grew up in a like my kid doesn't need therapy house. Yeah, so that didn't help with the situations that were confronting me. Okay. So basically, some stuff happened.
So I got into a fight.
Yeah, I got into like an argument basically, and that ended with like, well, if you don't like it, leave. And I was like, okay, I will then. And the way that kind of went down was with Anthony living in his car for a bit. So I did that. And the girl I was dating at the time let me stay in her dorm, which was really cool, until someone who to this day is unknown called the university and told them that was what was going on. And that made the university really upset because someone was living in their dorm and not paying them any money. And universities really like money. So she got in a bunch of trouble, but like they were going to kick her out, but didn't quite kick her out. So they let her finish her finals for that semester. And then I moved with her to Florida. And that's that story.
Okay. So I didn't hear any shenanigans. I heard moved out of mom who I didn't get along with, but what sort of was there, you were homeless, but you found a place to live at some point.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 months after like living in the car trying to do it that way, we were like, all right, we'll do that. I mean, part of that story is how I got stabbed. Um, so I was going to a Dunkin' Donuts at like
Okay.
2 in the morning because
Ah, yes.
my girlfriend really wanted coffee. And
Okay.
I wasn't working a ton at the time. So my goal was to be the best boyfriend that I could be to make her life as easy as possible while she was in college.
Okay.
So I would like get her food, I would handle the laundry, like I would try and make it as easy as possible so that she could destroy it in school. So she wanted coffee at like 2 a.m. so she could study. So I went and did it. Hofstra University is located very close to a very bad neighborhood, and that's where the Dunkin' Donuts happen to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, young Anthony at this time, for context, is very different from current Anthony. He's getting in a lot of street fights. I was doing a lot of martial arts, so I was winning a lot of street fights. I had a lot of confidence that I necessarily probably shouldn't have had.
Okay.
Um, and I exit the Dunkin' Donuts, and two gentlemen approach me and asked for my wallet. And I was like, no. And they were like, I ain't going to ask you again. And I was like, okay, give me your wallet. And I seized this moment of absolute shock on these men's faces because they were quite a bit taller than me. You've met me, Colin. I'm not a very large man.
No, I did not think, wow, this guy's really intimidating when we
Yeah.
met.
Nope. So that put them in a decent state of shock. So I threw coffee in one of their faces and I punched the other. The one I hit, thankfully, went down. The one I hit with the coffee was real upset. He pulled out a knife.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran into traffic. There was oncoming traffic, and I just dove like through the car as I just froggered away. But as I was getting away, he extended his knife hand and caught me in the back. And I was like, that hurt, but that's not a right now problem. And I sprinted back to the dorms. I got back. Girlfriend looked at the cut. Looks fine. It's a cut. It's fairly deep. We'll patch it up. We'll deal with it in the morning. It's a tomorrow problem. So I wake up in the morning and the cut is now like brown and like really looks bad. And I'm like feverish and not feeling good. Like I can't stand up. So we go to the hospital, obviously, because we're like, responsible adjacent. Like we probably should have went that night, but
better late than never.
Yeah, exactly. So we get to the hospital and they're like, oh my God, you have a really bad infection. We need to get you in there now. So they like clear it up. They do doctor stuff. I'm basically not a person at this point. I'm just like a thing they try to keep alive. So I don't die because I'm here. And they were like, yeah, you basically had like another half hour or so, or you were a dead man because that infection would have killed you.
Wow.
So that is the story of how Anthony almost died in Garden City.
What do you think about that, thinking back? What's like, how does that story sit with you? Like you told it in a very jovial and friendly manner, which is great, right? That's how people want to hear that story. But how does it, like, do you consider that an important point in who you are today, an important pivot point, or what's the significance of that story for you?
I definitely gotten a lot less fights after that. I think I've been in all of like one altercation between that point and now, and that's like a decade-long period. And that was just some dude at a concert who was being crazy to one of my friends. So like, yeah, it was a pretty core moment of like, oh, like even though I am capable of defending myself, it doesn't mean I need to fight to prove that all the time. In certain scenarios, you should just give them your empty wallet because you have no money, and that'll be okay, rather than getting stabbed and almost dying. And my interaction with that was always that, like, it's not so much that I'm like, I mean, to go a bit deep, I'm not super afraid to die. I just would really like to keep living. The things that I'm doing, I enjoy a lot, and I would like to stay here and keep doing them. And that's pretty much, that was where I kind of learned that.
Okay, that's great. Tell us the Anna and IT story.
So, around, like I said, so I met Anna at a pretty pivotal point where I was like getting the breakthrough on therapy. I was starting to become like the man I am today, basically, where, I was confronting a lot of stuff from my childhood, my past, and all the things that like, can wear on a person and break them down over time. I learned to confront them.
Okay.
So right as I met Anna I was going to school for IT, but not really learning much. Because I don't know if you've ever taken a couple of those IT 101 classes, but there's a whole lot of like, this is a mouse and this is a keyboard. And I was like, please. Because at the time I was working part-time in IT. I was working like 20 hours a week working for a guy who was essentially running his own IT business. And it was my introduction to MSPs, which are like outsourced IT for people that don't do IT things. So like I was doing server work and Office 365 administration, and I was just not, I was doing that at work, and then I would go to school and they'd be like, so how you use control panel? And it was just not worth it. So somewhere in that scramble, I stopped, because, I was talking to Anna and everything was going good. She went away to school in New Paltz, and she was like an hour and a half away. So I would drive up to see her. But it came to a point where I was like, hey, like, I need to make a decision. Like, she's getting her shit together. I should probably get mine together. So I just stopped going to school. I just full dropped out. I told the guy that I was working for, I was like, hey, you either need to bump me up to full time and I need to start like doing things to become a tech, or I'm going to look elsewhere. And he was like, I can't do that right now. You should probably look elsewhere. So I did that. And I got a like actual IT job. I found basically someone that was like, you don't have a degree, but you got a bunch of experience and you seem scrappy. So I'm willing to take a risk on you, basically. You don't have bad habits built up, so I don't have to unteach those. And you seem nice enough. So let's try it and see how it goes. Because keeping level 1 technicians and competent level 1 technicians is like the world's struggle in IT anyway, from what I've understood. So he took me in, and I've been working in IT since. That went really well. I'm very grateful for basically every IT job I've had has been great. Like they've had, their various things or like that, like I've left them. I'm now on my 3rd IT company since I've started, but every single one has like really added a bunch to like me professionally, but also personally. Really grateful for those opportunities.
You are scrappy, by the way.
I do my best.
I think you are scrappy. I think scrappy is a fun nickname for you, but I don't know how it fits in. So I don't know how it works, but it's somewhere there.
I'll take it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. So this has been wonderful. And what I want to ask you about before we wrap this part of the interview up is I want to ask you about 40K, but I want to talk about it as kind of a self-awareness exercise. So why is Anthony good at 40K?
I think that I'm going to talk about myself in the 3rd person like I'm talking about someone else. I think that's probably the most productive way to do this. We do this in therapy a bunch, so let's see if it still translates.
Okay.
I think
Colin's here for this.
Cool. I think Anthony is good at 40K because he puts a lot of time in and he focuses on execution over results. What I mean by that is that he focuses on making the right plays at the moment rather than looking at what happened from those plays and being like, oh, well, that wasn't the right thing to do because X happened. I think that type of context-based decision-making is really important. And at a more emotional level, Anthony is good at 40K because he doesn't tilt easily. Things have to be really crazy or my opponent has to be a real asshole for me to get upset. And that happens exceedingly rarely. I did like the count the other day. I played like 140 event games in the last year. And I've had 3 bad experiences. So like, I think those 2 factors together go a long way towards making a consistent performer in the field.
Okay. What do you think? Do you think that there's anything okay, so if that's what makes you good at 40K, is there anything that you look at and say, because I'm good at this thing over here is more of a struggle for me? Have you thought about it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of introspection in the journey to becoming a coach. So I think that's something I definitely struggle with and people like comment on this a lot. It was actually like almost insulting at one point when I first started doing well. People would point out that I don't really interact with like what's the best way to put this? Like the jank or like the intellectual side as much, because I'm so focused on the like killing. Because that's more like execution based in my experience, is that you can like have a game plan and execute that game plan when your goal is to remove assets more so than score points. But you can be a lot less interactive if your goal is to just score points. And I'm not very good at that in the game in general. I'm just not super good at that.
On it, or have you just decided that that's not your thing?
I, in general, try and lean into my strengths rather than focus on improving my weaknesses, but I am getting better at it as the strengths of my army shift. I'm definitely a little bit more like on the lookout for like the ability to be like, okay, what needs to happen in this turn? And in the past, because Druhkari has been so strong, that answer is often violently end their lives.
Right.
But now it looks more like hold these objectives and do your rod. So
Right.
it's a balancing act as time goes on. But I'm working on it within the context of staying good at the things I'm good at, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. There's one more thing I think we should talk about. You mentioned very affectionately and enthusiastically, you mentioned therapy. And I'm a big proponent of therapy. So why do you think people should go to therapy? Give a pitch to people that are listening that might be having a hard time and are afraid to do it or don't think that it's for them. What would you say to those people? Because like a lot of people listen to this that need help.
Yeah, I think that therapy is probably the thing that there's a direct thing that saved my life, which is a conversation I had with my friend when I was about to end it. And then there's like a more broad, like how I was able to continue after that point. And that second thing is therapy. It can be very difficult to find a good therapist, but when you hit it, there have been very few things in my life as satisfying as being able to like sit down with a therapist who really got it and was able to work with me and help me resolve things that I didn't even know that I was doing, like caps that I had put on myself or like negative self-talk that I had that was like completely unnecessary. And a lot of that stuff, like people cover it with jokes, but it really does affect your psyche, like time after time, because you just don't expect yourself. Like you're like, that thing's not for me. I'm not that person. It's like, no, why not? That's totally be you. And sometimes that thing that you're like, I'm not that person is therapy, and you should just do it.
That's great. I think that there's a perception that the average person understands themselves really well, and I don't think they do.
I don't think that's true at all.
I think that you go through your life thinking, well, I know the most about me, so I must have the most awareness of me.
Yep.
And that's, unless you've worked a lot on self-awareness, that's just really not the case. And it's very useful to get a professional to sit down across from you who works with people on their issues for a living and can say, wow, I can't believe you said that this way. Do you think it's because of that? Like, and they can actually dig into what's going on. I'm a big proponent of that as well.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, great. So plug some stuff.
Oh man, so many things to plug now. First and foremost, listen to 40K Fight Club on the Best in Tabletop Network. That is me, Ennis, and Nathan.
That's right here.
It's right here. It's so easy.
Like subscribe to this thing, and you will get to see Anthony talk about why the meta is so bad right now.
It's not so bad. It's just a little compressed. It's just a little held down.
Compressed. Fair enough. All right. What else? What else do you want to plug, Anthony?
I am a coach through Art of War, so check us out over there. There's lots of great coaches, but I'm one of them. So come hit me up. I can give you coaching. If you want to be better at 40K, I'm one of the mans that can help you achieve that. Shout out especially most recently to Mythicos Studios, who have tacked on to help me live the 40K dream. Love those guys. Shout out Kenny specifically. They're awesome. I love them very much. They're the circuit that I helped come up in, or that I came up. They helped me come up in. Those RTT Shark Tanks really get you ready for the Super Major Series. And shout out to Anna most of all. My girlfriend is a fucking saint, and I could not do a fraction of what I do without her. And my other teammate, Brandon Fox, who does all the travel and stuff for us. He's a fucking hero. Love that guy.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Anthony. I really appreciate you sharing your life with us. We're going to end this here, but don't worry, there's more Anthony to come. In part 2 of Chasing the Narrative, we're going to get weird. That's the idea behind part 2. I'm going to pick a topic that I want to talk about. And today, the topic I want to talk about is mixed martial arts. So we're going to talk about that. And I don't know anything about it. So we'll learn about it together on the next episode, which is part 2 of this. So thanks, everybody. And we'll talk to you soon.